First of all, can I say it's incredible to see this place packed. Tickets were sold out. The idea that so many people would give up a day to come and talk about energy technology in an underground bunker, which I believe is actually nuclear. No, I don't know. In central London is really incredible. I wanted to share a personal story, really, to begin with, which is I left school when I was 16 to write video games. I am a technologist at heart. If anyone's ever heard of a Z80, it's a 3.5 megahertz processor with almost enough power to put pixels on a screen fast enough to play a game. And that was my first job. I was so passionate about technology that even though one day I ended up going to university and working at Procter & Gamble, sort of being interested in and tinkering and learning about tech has been the mainstay of my personal career and a lot of my life. So when I was at Procter & Gamble working in marketing, someone came up to me and said, "Greg, we've got the perfect new kind of job for you, which is can you build a website for, or lead the building of a website for all of our products?" And this was about 1995. And I was lucky enough to have experienced the web already, to experience the internet. And I said, "No, there's no point, it's rubbish." I said, "Look, you've all read about it, you've seen the hype in the media and stuff like that, but honestly, the internet is terrible." The problem with early adoption is you often get things before they're really very good. And you need to understand the power of exponential change to see how the components can come together to create something truly extraordinary. So when I first experienced the internet in, I think, 1991, maybe 92, the search engine that we had available was called Gopher. When you typed something into Gopher, it literally went and looked at every single web page to find your results. It wasn't like Google that had already had a look and then could tell you where to find them. So you sat there for an hour and a half while it searched all 50,000 pages on the internet to come back with pretty much no results. And because of that experience, I'd been excited to try the internet, but because of that experience, I'd kind of written it off. Now, I hope that you'll appreciate that my learning from that has been that when I saw through the 90s the web revolution and the world of today in which there'll be more internet connections in this room than there were in the UK in 1991, right? Every device we've got is continually talking to the internet. The lesson I took out of it was that you shouldn't look where a technology is today. You should look at all the components and the rate of change of each of them and see how they're going to come together to create exponential change. And I think the energy transition is just like that. Today, we can look at some of the components required for a clean energy system. Solar power is 200 times cheaper than it was 40 years ago, and it's still getting cheaper. Wind turbines have roughly halved in cost in a decade. I mean, there's some supply chain issues now, but they affect everything. Increasingly, the cost of batteries is falling at the same sort of rate. And when you put these things together, you realize that inexorably, inevitably, these technologies combine to be better than the world of fossil fuels. Look, if you can put electricity that is 200 times cheaper to generate into a battery that is halving in price every 5 or 10 years, that's unbeatable. Now, energy technology isn't just about the hardware, the batteries, the solar panels, and the wind turbines. It's also about the digitization. The fact that we're moving from a world where energy came in rectangles. You turn on a fossil fuel power station, you get a rectangle of power, you turn it off. If you're a grid operator, you wake up in the morning and you literally have a bunch of people turning on a small number of very large power plants, stacking those rectangles to meet demand. In a renewable world, you kind of wake up in the morning, you look at the weather forecast to see what you're going to have available. And it's going to vary throughout the day. But at exactly the same time as that's happening, we're changing how we consume electricity. An electric car battery, a typical electric car battery, in the UK, a typical-ish country in the rich world, can store enough power for a typical house for about 5 days. So we're moving from a paradigm where the people running the grid have to ensure that every time you switch on a light, there's a generating station somewhere, to you're probably going to have the power in your driveway. And if it's not in your driveway, it might be next door's. If it's not in next door's, it'll be sitting in a battery at the end of the street or in the substation. And that power can have been generated at the lowest price we've ever seen power in history, and getting cheaper every year. Instead of worrying about the gaps in between the renewables, if we first of all capitalize on the astonishing, abundant, zero marginal cost, zero carbon, zero guilt energy at these times, first of all, we'll bring the average cost down. And secondly, we'll reduce and even eliminate the problem of the gaps. But one of the problems in any technology transformation is that people will hold it up to a standard of perfection. They will say, but what about X? And create any number of marginal scenarios. And I think the job of those who understand technology is to say, look, first of all, if we solve the easy problems, the hard problems get easier. Every solution we bring into being reduces the complexity of the next step. There's a great thinker, Amory Lewin, that says, this doesn't get harder. People used to say the last 20% of a clean energy system is the hardest. It's the easiest. By the time we get there, we've got all of the components, and we've been cutting costs every year. It was fascinating when I researched I went back to the period when I was a bit kind of misled by the early stages of the internet. And I was watching these old TV shows that introduced the internet to people. The first online newspapers, there was a system in the US that provided newspapers online. It had 8 national titles. They took 2 hours to download, and you had to pay $5 an hour for the download, right? Quite rightly, the presenter says, we need to worry about excluded communities. Like, this is a plaything for the rich, only for those who can own an expensive computer and pay $5 an hour to download very, very slowly. Of course, if we project forward, what happened with the internet? Well, actually, the hardware got so cheap that it didn't become a barrier for low-income communities. It actually delivered the solutions to many of the problems they faced. Look, in rich countries, in inverted commas, everyone's got a mobile phone, a smartphone with the internet, with access to all of the information and services that they need to be part of society that was harder before. But it's not just in rich countries. In developing countries, $20 Android phones have democratized information and brought access to products and services. It's exactly the same with the renewable revolution. The technologies that today are increasingly coming together to mean that a wealthy EV driver can charge their car for half the price or a quarter the price than it would be if they just took standard grid power. And exactly the technologies that are paving the way to help eliminate expensive, polluting fossil fuels in developing countries. In fact, 10 million people are killed every year, not from the climate change impact of burning fossil fuels, but just from the local air pollution. So as we take the technologies that are getting cheaper every year, and we use the digitization to fill cars, to fill scooters, to fill electric bikes with cheap, clean energy, we're actually going to help dramatically improve the lives of the people in the poorest communities as well. And I think it's really important we think about this, because at every stage on this journey, it's about the pieces coming together exactly as they had to do for the internet. But we're also at a time when we've got other learnings from the internet. In the UK in the 1990s, the internet revolution was held back by regulation. There were regulations about what a telephone company could send down a wire, and what a cable company could, and what a TV company could do. The whole thing was stuck in a thicket of who was allowed to do what. But in the US in 1994, the British TV show Tomorrow's World could send an email to Bill Clinton. They couldn't send it to our Prime Minister because they didn't have email. and received back the US's internet policy. And the US's internet policy was anyone could send anything down any cable, and they could build cables as long as they provided access to other companies as well, with the mandate that they had to connect every classroom and every library. And I think in the same way, if we're going to enable this revolution to benefit people at all income levels, in all countries, directly through cheaper energy, directly through reducing the air pollution that kills them, and most crucially through tackling climate change, we now need to have similar rules. So instead of here, we've got 20-year grid queues, or 15 years to be more precise. Instead of having a central government department that decides that we're going to have some wind power here and some solar power there, we learn from the internet that the people that are innovating, the entrepreneurs, the investors that want to drive benefit for their customers and for communities worldwide will drive down the price and will drive up accessibility, the more that they can build this infrastructure where people want it for the benefit of customers and communities. And I think it's that kind of innovation, entrepreneurialism, that is going to be so crucial. And with Octopus, and I think this is the first time I've mentioned the company, by the way, this isn't a big advert, but with Octopus, something really significant happened for me about 3 or 4 years ago. I was sitting looking at the stars upwards, unlike Tim, and I just read this article that described us as a leading clean energy group. I was so proud. Only a few years before that, we'd been a startup that no one had heard of. I was so proud. But I also had this kind of what I call a long, dark moment of the soul. Because the reality was at the time, I knew that we were selling gas to maybe 1 million households. In fact, at the time, that would have still made us one of the UK's biggest carbon emitters. So here we are being described as a clean energy group, and yet the dirty secret was we sold an incredible amount of climate change-causing gas. I really seriously considered, I got my phone in my hand to start phoning up the team to say, look, we're going to stop selling gas. Because I thought then our conscience can be clean. But of course our customers were going to still need gas, they still need to heat their homes. And it's easy to enjoy the moral high ground of walking away from a problem. It's much harder to decide what you're going to do about it. But I thought, look, we have to find a way. If you're ever going to have an energy transition, or if I'm ever going to be able to be genuinely proud of our company, we have to find a way to remove gas from the system. EVs were doing well in the world of transport, so heating buildings was the single biggest area that needed to be sorted. And we did an incredible amount of research. We're lucky, we're privileged. We didn't have an incumbency. We don't own any gas reserves or gas wells. We could genuinely think from a clean sheet of paper, what is the right answer? We looked really hard at hydrogen. As Tim says, when hydrogen burns, it's pretty clean. But when you look at it, there are only 2 ways of creating hydrogen cleanly, really, at scale. There's blue hydrogen, where you take natural gas, methane, break it apart, get the hydrogen out, and send it down pipes to burn it. And at the other end, you bury the carbon dioxide so that there's no carbon emissions to the atmosphere. But you're starting with natural gas, we just had a gas crisis. Turns out gas is quite expensive and can be exceptionally expensive. And if you do a bunch of stuff with it, it's going to get even more expensive. Particularly, by the way, doing that bunch of stuff means the following. It means that you need to be able to bury the carbon at scale and be pretty sure it's not going to escape. Because if it escapes, the whole exercise was pointless. You need to be able to take the hydrogen and pump it into millions of homes. I should have asked Tim about this, but whenever a rocket launch is delayed, it's because of a fuel leak, and that fuel's hydrogen. Rocket scientists find the universe's smallest molecule quite hard to contain. So the idea of pumping it into millions of homes, and for it to be able to get round through every big pipe and through the little pipes, up to the house, into the house, through the meters, through the joints that have been there maybe for decades, even centuries in some houses, through every valve and every appliance. I mean, it's staggeringly complex and just not credible. the expense of it, and the fact that if there's just one house where you've missed one joint, you've got, also one of the most explosive fuels in there just being leaked out. It's just not really very likely. The alternative way of making hydrogen is green hydrogen. You've still got all the problems of getting it to houses, but at least you don't have the expense of the methane in the first place, and you don't have the expense of the challenge of trying to bury the carbon. Green hydrogen is made by generating green electricity. You then use electrolysis to break hydrogen out of water, and then send that down the pipes. So for every unit of green electricity you generate, once you've done all of the electrolysis, the compression of the hydrogen, pumped it down, burned it, and used it to heat a home, maybe 30 or 40% of the energy that was in the electricity has turned into heat. So that looked expensive as well. If anyone doesn't like wind turbines, we will need an awful lot of them to do that. So we looked at heat pumps as well. Now, electric heat pumps, in theory, pretty magical. A heat pump takes electricity, and because it's not converting the energy in electricity into heat, it uses the energy to move heat from one place to another. It uses it to move heat from the atmosphere or the ground or water into a home, and in doing so, it multiplies up. Well, I'll talk about that in a second. It's astonishingly efficient. You get typically maybe 3 units of heat for every unit of electricity. By the way, increasingly, different ways of doing it, 3.5, 4. You literally get 3-4 times more heat energy than you need in electricity energy. That makes it 6, 7, 8 times more efficient than green hydrogen. Suddenly you go, whoa, this could work. But when you dig into heat, of course, if any of you, there's a newspaper in the UK called the Daily Telegraph, and there may be some journalists here from the Telegraph. I hugely respect almost all your work. But I really would like to have a chat about heat pumps. Maybe today we can do something to help you as well. But look, the heat pump is magic. It's just got a couple of issues, which they're very expensive to build and very expensive to install. And traditionally, there's a view that they may not generate enough heat for a typical home without some fairly significant upgrades in insulation and radiators. But if we could tap into that 3-fold multiple from energy into heat efficiently, this has got to be the right solution. So instead of phoning up the team and telling them that we're going to abandon gas, I phoned up our CFO and I said, look, I need about 10 million quid to start with to build a research and development centre for heat pumps. And we need to do whatever it takes to make heat pumps cheaper. Because if we've got a moral responsibility, it's to bring the solutions at prices that societies can afford. We can't ask governments to keep forking out massive amounts of money to subsidize small numbers of homes. We need to make this technology cost competitive with gas boilers. So we began that process. A year ago, I don't think our company ever installed a heat pump. Today, I think we're the biggest retrofit installers in the UK. I tell you, I'm inundated by customers telling me how much better a heat pump than is a gas boiler. But we also began the process of creating the technologies that would enable these to get cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. And so today, I'm really excited to be able to share the Octopus Cozy 6. If you can't see it at the back, for those who don't know me, I'm not very tall. This thing is really dinky. Designed by our engineering team, led by Jason Castles, PhD, in Belfast. In less than a year, what we've created is a heat pump that's designed to answer so many of the questions that we get asked that say, heat pumps can't be the future. So let me share a couple of things. First of all, it comes with the Octopus Cozy Hub, and the Octopus Cozy Pods, designed in London by a team led by Daria, just here. Together, these two devices, or this family of devices, is the beginning of the path to genuinely democratizing clean electric heating in the UK. The Cozy 6 is a high-temperature heat pump. It runs at 78, 80 degrees C. So, pretty much, in fact, it runs at higher temperature than a gas boiler. If a gas boiler can heat your home, so can the Cozy 6. The first model, the Cozy 6, is for a 3 or 4 bedroom semi. We've got the 8 and 12 models coming soon. The Cozy Pods fit in rooms around your house so that there's a continuous temperature read back to the heat pump of every room. So that if you today, with your gas boiler, there are bits of your house that can never get warm or bits that are always too hot. With the Cozy 6, we can be monitoring what's causing that. And with legendary Octopus service, this is all feeding back to Kraken, the platform that we already use to support millions of energy customers, with 4.8-star service on Trustpilot and which recommended 6 years in a row. So now your heating system isn't just a device that someone fits and leaves you. It's one where, if it's not providing the comfort you need in your home, there are experts on the end of the phone who can diagnose and help you fix it, or send out one of our 1,000 or so engineers to put it right. It's also built into the Octopus Energy apps. Instead of yet another app for your heating system, the same app that you use already to control your home energy, to pay your bills, to monitor your smart meter, to manage your electric vehicle charging if you have it, to see what's going on with your stuff. It's now also the home for your heating system. So with the Octopus Cozy 6, I think we really are on the way to helping people see the exponential improvement in renewable technologies that means we can tackle climate change faster and cheaper than anyone thought. Now, when we started this journey, every article I read said that a typical heat pump install was about £15,000 in the UK. Over the last year, if we look at the government data, after the £5,000 government grant, the average price has been about £8,000. So already, driven by increased interest and demand for heat pumps, by the fact heat pumps are going to more normal homes, and driven by the efficiencies as we scale up the industry in the UK, the price has come down dramatically, of course, with a very welcome government support. Octopus's figure for the last year, our average install has been just under £5,000, because we've been investing so heavily in the systems and technologies, the processes, to reduce the time and effort and complexity of an install. With the Cozy Heat 6, a typical home that was previously paying just under £5,000 will now be paying around £3,000 after the government grant. It'll get the Cozy Hub, Cozy Pods, standard installation, and aftercare for that price. And I think we've now paved the way to the thing we've been dreaming of, which is if a home already has a reasonably up-to-date hot water cylinder, and a reasonably well-looked-after heating system, some people have been able to get this for free after the government grant. So, in the same way as so many of the innovations we saw for the internet paved the way for democratization of information in rich countries and poor, so I hope this is one of the major components in moving towards a truly clean energy system, faster and cheaper than anyone expected. Thank you.